For AI to be maximally useful to us, it is actually going to need to have free will.
You're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske.
And I'm Rudy Salo.
And this is the podcast where you learn what you didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a happy life, a curious life, getting some wisdom. Okay, this is a great episode. For those of you who like the sciencey stuff with the philosophy, talking to you, Tony McCanta. It was great to see you at the reunion. This is the episode for you. And I love this because a lot of times we think, especially with the university system, like you're majoring in X and therefore you don't need to understand Y or something like that, as though things aren't connected. But this is a really great episode where we're threading philosophical questions with the reality of what science gives us and then also the technological aspect of it. We are talking about free will. Do you have it? Are we just caused like everything else in the universe? And if that is so, then what are the possibilities for AI? Because AI is also caused and thinking. Well, we're learning about that. What did you think, Rudy?
I think this is going to be one of the greatest episodes ever.
We have a physicist.
Yeah, because really, and I'm writing an article about this on Substack, Tron 3 came out. I'm a whole Tron nerd. I'd like to do a philosophy of Tron episode. But as I was showing this to my children, and I was watching the first one, the second one, watched the third one, and I realized that consciousness and free will and computing has been in the zeitgeist going all the way back to 2001, A Space Odyssey with Hal. And this is the topic du jour. And what we learn on this episode, I'm not going to even say it on the intro, is groundbreaking, scary, and we need to prepare for this. This episode is one that I think people need to listen on repeat. This is the future. It's absolutely mind-blowing what we discussed with Samir today. And boy, I can't wait to have Samir on again, Gwen, where he and I can definitively put this alien bullcrap to bed. And we're going to do that.
Yes. Well, I guess I should say that our guest is physicist and author of The Science of Free Will, How Determinism Affects Everything from the Future to AI to Traffic to God to Bees, Samir Varma. Yeah, we learned a lot because, this question about whether or not we have free will, we tackled this in philosophy for a long time now. I mean, since Hume, there has been this rejection of free will, that it doesn't really make sense, but we didn't really have the science behind it. Now, free will feels intuitive, like we're making decisions all the time. Of course, I can choose to do this or that. But what Samir reminds us of with physics and what Hume had talked about is that everything is caused, which means that when you are acting, when you are thinking, when you are speaking, we could trace back the causes to understand why you did, think, whatever, say. That means that it's not free, that there's some strings attached. So we're going to be talking about this philosophical debate with a physicist. I can't wait for everyone to hear this. And I also want to remind everyone to visit our patreon.com/goodisinthedetails. I'm putting a new book there for our book club. I've been telling everybody about it. It's nonfiction. It's also sciencey, and I love it. I can't wait to share it with you all. Rudy, what are we going to call this? Rudy freak out?
Really good question. I'm going to say, use this, okay?
Mind blown.
No. Artificial intelligence, free will, and consciousness.
That sounds good.
As a physicist, one of the things you always think about is the fact that you write down what we call laws of physics, mathematical equations, and those mathematical equations are supposed to be true everywhere and at all times. Now, if these mathematical equations are true everywhere and at all times, and they apply to every single particle in your body, then the question is, what is the difference between your body and a machine? And that's been stuck in my head for, decades.
Yes. In philosophy, we talk about debates about free will. One of the things I find so interesting, it has a moral component to it. There's this fear that if we were to get rid of free will, then people would no longer be responsible for their behavior. I don't agree with that position, but there's also a deep sense of, let's say, Christianity in particular, that is entrenched in this idea of free will. Did you find yourself in the weeds of the traditional or custom issue when it comes to tackling free will?
No, and for two different reasons.
Okay.
Let me me give you the second reason first, and then I'll go back to the first reason. So the second reason is that if in fact it is true that every particle in your body is following a deterministic mathematical law, then it's also true that every particle in everybody else's body is following a deterministic mathematical law. And it's also true, so is the earth, and so is the court, and so are judges and politicians and everybody else. You can certainly start worrying about, oh, well, if nobody has free will under the laws of physics, well, then why is anyone responsible for anything? But that's actually not quite right. And the reason it's not quite right is because everybody else is also following the same laws. So there isn't in fact a contradiction, because they're doing what the laws have designed them to do too. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is actually, which is really the first thing, is what in fact is free will if we are going to take the physics seriously. So I decided, in fact, when I wrote this book, that I was going to take physics seriously and not sort of try to dance around the point like people do. The issue is, it is in fact completely true that the motion of every particle that makes up your body is determined by mathematical law. Basically, you're made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms. Atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And protons and neutrons are made up of things called quarks. We know the fundamental law that governs the behavior of all quarks and all electrons, and that's called the standard model of particle physics, and we've known it since about 1970. So we really do know the mathematical model that explains everything about every motion of every particle in your body. But you cannot, however, use that to make any predictions for three different reasons. The first reason you cannot make any prediction is that it's just too darned complicated. So if, for example, I wanted to predict what you were going to do over the next 1 second, then I would need to know not only the state of all 10 to the 27 atoms that make up your body, but also the state of every single other atom that might impinge upon you in the next, say, 1 second. And in 1 second, light travels almost the distance to the moon. So we're talking about all the matter between here and the moon. So you'd have to simulate all of that if you wanted to predict what you were going to do for 1 second. That's impractical. Now you could come back and say, yes, smart guy, but that's just an engineering problem. True. So then you can say, fine, but here's the second issue. The second issue is chaos. Chaos is the statement that even if you have something to predict with, if the prediction is sensitive to its inputs, let's say that if one of the inputs was 1.0001 and you changed it to 1.00011, a tiny, tiny difference, and the output was completely different, that would be chaos. So you also have the situation that you could have chaos, which is to say we'll never be able to measure anything with perfect accuracy. And the fact that we cannot measure everything with perfect accuracy means you cannot make a perfect prediction, which is true. And then again, you can come back and say, well, smart guy, that's great, but that's an engineering problem. But there is a third problem that you cannot get around. That really, I believe, is the fundamental source of actual free will. And that's what Stephen Wolfram called computational irreducibility, which is a nice big phrase, but it actually means something very simple. Essentially, if you see some complex behavior out in the world, say, for example, our behavior, you would expect that the rules that generate it, if you could find them, would also be complex rules. What Wolfram found and showed in his book, A New Kind of Science, back in 2002, is that you can actually have rules that are incredibly simple. I like to say rules that even a 5-year-old could follow without any trouble, such that their output cannot ever, under any circumstances whatsoever, be predicted. That's computational irreducibility. And that is, in fact, the point. Our behavior is computationally irreducible, which is why even we don't know what we're going to do until we do it. And there's no way of getting around that. And in a computationally irreducible system, the only way to know what the system is going to do is to wait for the system to do it. There's no shortcut to the result. And that's kind of the point. And I believe that is the genuine, actual, proper source of free will. And I also believe that this sort of helps both parties that are sort of the warring parties in the free will debate see that they're both right, but they're all sort of only looking at half of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really bad at mathematics, but I'm particularly bad at physics. It's probably one of the worst classes I ever took in high school. I have issues with philosophy as well, because I don't think it answers anything. And I think while you were just speaking there, while I got the gist of it, I just realized something. Physics is in and of itself the philosophy of science. And the question that I have to ask you, Samir, is, do you believe that free will exists?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the word free will. That's sort of the point of the book.
You're like a lawyer,
now he
too.
sounds like a
that's why I
philosopher,
like
yeah.
being a lawyer. The answer to every question, if you're a lawyer, is it depends. I like this guy. No, sorry. I'm if you haven't listened to any of the episodes, I'm the comedy guy that comes
Absolutely.
in. I am the 5-year-old who can't understand that you said any 5-year-old can understand simple instructions, except for me. What I'm trying, I think I understood what you said is basically basically, even if there is something that is determinism, where we think we can know what somebody's going to do, it's impossible because that person doesn't even know what they're going to do until they do it. Is that what you
Yep,
said?
that's exactly what I said. And
It-
what I'm saying is that is
I'm
in
not that
fact a
stupid.
requirement of the physics. It's not something that I'm imposing. It's not something I'm coming up with. It's not something that I'm saying, oh, this would be cool if it were true. What I'm saying is it is in fact true, and in fact it must be true.
Let me take one step further, since Gwen talked about our fascination in particular on this podcast with artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Introducing artificial intelligence both into humanity, or even, I mean, we don't need to jump into it right now, but Neuralink or connecting brains to computers in order to deal with dementia or whatever. Do you think that will result in more ability to predict or less ability to predict with the introduction of AI into humanity?
That's a very good question. I think the answer is probably less, but not by as much as you might think. So say slightly less. And the reason again goes right back to computational irreducibility again. And I go through this in the book. For AI to be maximally useful to us, it is actually going to need to have free will. The more
Whoa, hold on a second. Can you repeat that? Because that was like, hey, Gwen, this is the intro to this episode.
Okay.
This whole, and even me pausing and interrupting our guest. Samir, can you say that again?
Yes. For AI to be maximally useful to us, we are going to need for it to have free will.
Okay.
Dramatic pause. Okay, wait, hold on. Are you saying that free will is not something that is uniquely human / evidence of consciousness? Or are you saying that we need to let AI become conscious so it can have free will, so we can maximize its usefulness and utility?
That's a good question. The answer is I'm saying I'm a physicist, and a physicist believes, because the evidence suggests that this is true, that everything is made up of physical things. So the AI is made up of the exact same things that you and I are. We're made up of atoms and electrons and protons and so on. So is the AI. The fundamental rules the AI is following, the rules that live below the AI, are the same rules as the one that we live on. So the substrate, if you wish. We are made of atoms, as I said earlier. Our brains compute by moving electrons around. That's effectively how they work. It's a little more complicated, but that's good enough. That's roughly the same as how an AI works. It also moves electrons around.
Okay, walk with me here.
Yep.
Or go down this psychotic river that I'm going down right now, because this is some like deep shit. Sorry, but
That's
this
cool.
is deep.
I love this stuff.
Okay, AI and I are made up of the same stuff. Okay, fine. AI didn't experience what I experienced growing up with my background, or I was born the son of immigrants in Orange County in the late 1970s and grew up during a time where things were very chaotic for Middle Easterners in the 80s and 90s. Certain things that had happened, and that all of that experience has made me, view things a certain way. Okay.
Yep.
I think what you're saying is that was I don't want to call it the software. I don't want to call it the code, because I do think that experiences can change over time with interpretation and maturity. But you're probably going to say is, yeah, all right, whatever. Like AI can experience other people's experiences, or it can download other people's interpretations of events, and that can influence its decision or its output or something, just like you. Is that what you're going to say?
Almost. AI will have its own experiences, and AI will be its own form of intelligence. It's better to think of AI, I like to say, as a alien intelligence as opposed to an artificial intelligence.
Oh, like aliens! Jesus Christ, Gwen! Have you listened
it's
to any
better
of
to
our
think of
episodes
it
on
that
aliens?
way.
I don't believe in aliens, but that's
Neither
a whole
do
other
I.
thing. Okay. See,
This is where
it's a whole other episode.
This is what this is what I'm wondering. So, for example, I've got this pen. If I let go of it and it falls to the floor, it's not all that difficult to go back and find all the causal factors for gravity and how it fell.
Yes.
But for me to even want to use it as an example, the causal factors for me to do that are ginormous, almost infinite, because you would have to go back even to my second of birth and then take into account every single causal factor.
Yes.
And so the idea of free will is based on the illusion, because we haven't been able to trace, and it would be impossible to trace every single causal factor to explain why I would use this as an example. But even if hypothetically we could list out every single causal factor that brought me to that example, it would not yield any information as to what I'm going to do next. And
Yes.
but one of the things, Rudy, which I think you're going to be a little uncomfortable, because Rudy wants to live forever and he wants to have his brain put into a computer. One of the ideas that's been in theology and philosophy up until recently, because of physics, is that there's been this idea that the human being is defined as two parts, the physical and the non-physical. So, Samir, am I understanding correctly that your position is that the human being is 100% material, just like everything else in the universe, and is
Yes.
therefore governed by the laws of physics? So this
Yes.
notion of a mind or a soul that is part of what our brain produces, but it's not actually a thing.
Yes.
In
So,
other
Rudy,
words,
you don't have a soul.
Bullshit is what you're saying. All that. Another word. Sorry, Samir. Let me just get it for our audience. That's all bullshit. Is that correct?
Well, again, it depends how you decide to interpret it, and I'll give you a proper answer to that. If you say the religious form of a soul, that's not a good concept. But there is a related concept to that actually makes sense, which is close enough actually. And that is that what is unique about you, what's different about you than me, is while we're made up of the exact same atoms, your arrangement of atoms is not the same as my arrangement of atoms. So your soul, the essence of you, is this thing, which you, however you want to think about it, which is the arrangement of atoms that makes up you. And it is the arrangement, and I say this in the book, it is the arrangement and nothing but the arrangement that is what matters. So the difference between you and a dog, or between me and a table, or between you and a microphone, is simply the arrangement of the atoms of which you are made. And that is effectively your soul.
Some deep shit, Gwen.
I love thinking about that. I mean, I think it's so cool because I think culturally there's this lack of acceptance that we are material. Like it's been the scientific community that has come in, but in some ways in our everyday life, we seem to accept this idea of causality and determinism just from parenting. Like we want to give our kids the right books, go to the right school. You would have to have some understanding of causality and determinism in order to do that. I think there's also this fear that it reduces the human being to the status of an animal. So in the same way, like when you get a pet and you train it, if we say that the human being is no different from the microphone or from a pet, then in Western culture, it seems to have downgraded the status of the human being. But as Samir just pointed out quite beautifully, I don't think that it actually highlights the incredible uniqueness.
Yes.
Because it's from the second you were born and every single causal factor that you interact with,
Yes.
there will never be an identical Rudy.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
And that's remarkable.
And that's provably true. That's the other thing. See, the other thing I didn't want to do, because again, I'm a physicist by training, is I really didn't want to have arguments up in the air, as I put them, where, you argue about it for 2,000 years and people keep still arguing about it for 2,000 years. I don't find that satisfactory personally. So I wanted to start from physics.
Sorry.
No, I love philosophy, but I like grounded philosophy, like Bertrand Russell, for example.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I don't like it when the person that is doing the philosophy doesn't know anything about modern science and doesn't care to know anything about modern science. That bothers me a lot, actually. So one of the purposes of this book was to sort of be a little bit cheeky and sort of say, look, professional philosophers, look, here's a physicist telling you this is pretty much the physics consensus. I've said nothing radical, by the way. From everything I'm telling you, it sounds radical, but it isn't. If you scratch a physicist, they'll tell you the same thing. It's so much in the air and in the water and everything else that we breathe that we don't even think about this stuff. But this is how we think. Because it's just so naturally obvious to us that it must be this way. Because that's what all our experiments are telling us. It can't be anything else.
Can we talk a little bit more about AI and allowing AI to have free will?
Yes.
I guess, I don't know why, maybe I was thinking, wow, that's shocking. But okay, we already see some examples of AI, quote unquote, hallucinating, right?
Yep.
I'm a lawyer, and
Yep.
there's very clear examples that literally AI is making up case references.
Yep.
Right? Like we know that. Like
Yep.
it's like judge
And gets lawyers into trouble.
Very,
Yep.
very much. That's why I avoid
Yep.
AI in work. I do a little bit with graphic design, and that's about it.
Try ChatGPT 5 Pro, by the way, it doesn't hallucinate much anymore.
I'm more of a Gemini person, but
Okay.
that's just
and
my
also,
Google button.
you if you look up my paper, my newest patient cannot blink. If you Google it, I wrote it with a psychiatrist. You can actually use techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy to get your AI to give you back answers that make more sense.
I'm obsessed with CBT. We have a whole episode about cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, so CBT can be applied to AI to get better answers back from the AI. That's what the
Jesus
paper is about.
Christ,
Check it
this
out.
is
It's on
shitty.
Zenodo.
Okay, this is wild. Is the hallucinations an example of AI free will?
Yes.
Okay, so all right, good. See,
And
I come off as stupid, but I'm not. I actually make connections
yes.
very, 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 very quickly.
So here's the point. Let me expand on what you just said. Whenever you write down a mathematical equation of any kind and you try to optimize it, which is what you're doing when you're training an AI, the more constraints you put on that mathematical equation, the less optimal the solution will be. That's just a mathematical fact. Imagine that let's do something very simple. Yeah. Draw a curve, a two-axis curve, a y-axis and an x-axis, and just draw any old squiggly curve like this. Okay. Yep. Some very complicated curve that goes up and down a lot. Okay. Now try to write an algorithm that knows nothing about this curve, but tries to find its highest point. That's called optimization. You with me so far? Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, if you now tell the thing that's trying to find that optimal point, you're not allowed to go this way and you can't do that and you can't take this step and you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that, then the peak that it will find is almost certainly going to be lower than the actual peak. So that is the statement that the more you constrain an optimization system, the lower the optimal value you're going to get. It's just a fact.
Okay, so, all right.
So this is the problem. So the problem with AI is, what I was saying is, if you want optimal performance from your AI, you're going to have to let it explore its entire space of possibilities. And the more you constrain its space of possibilities, the less optimal it will be. Now, you may be willing to live with the trade-off, but you will have to make that trade-off consciously.
Okay. Now, AI, good example. You typed in something, you have it drafted your brief in litigation, and it made up a fake case, and you turned it into the judge, and now your license is about to get revoked because you put in something that's false, fraudulent to a court. Yep. So what do? Do you go home and you type in, hey, dummy, AI, that was a fake case. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to give you a timeout. I'm going to discipline you. How do you discipline AI, Samir?
You cannot discipline an AI, but what you can do, you can use, as I said, this is why I wrote the paper, CBT techniques to help it not hallucinate so much. So, number one, you say to it things like, this is really important to me. A mistake will be really embarrassing. I really need a good answer. Can you list 3 ways in which your answer might possibly be wrong? Can you recheck your answer? Give me a prompt that I can use that you will then use yourself, such that you will be able to check your work and so on. You have to be paranoid about checking everything over and over again and telling the AI to generate its own prompt to check itself.
Do we run the risk of turning AI into like a bunch of Gen Xers who are filled with anxiety? And then do we just make AI kind of crazy because we're all crazy? And then does it pull off something like HAL from 2001 where they gave HAL these conflicting instructions like, hey, you have to protect the crew, but you got to keep the secret? HAL lost it and wound up killing everyone on the ship. Like, what's the risk there by making AI paranoid?
Yeah, good question. So the answer to that is that you have to do it within reason, obviously, number one, because yes, you might get the result of something being anxious or seemingly anxious, whether you want to call it actual anxiety or not. But the second thing is that we are already starting to move, ChatGPT has already done this, to a model that's not actually one model, it's multiple models. One of the things that's going to start happening is that you'll feed the AI a query, and then there'll be a model that generates the result and another model that checks the result of the first model and feeds back whether that result seems right or wrong. And they go back and forth for a bit before you get an answer back. So that's one way that you can actually have a check on the AI without driving it crazy, but at the same time getting answers that are more likely to be correct. That's just one example. There are other things you can do. There's lots of little stuff that you can tweak. These are all engineering questions because we don't really have a theory of AI, just like we don't have a theory of the brain. These are all really engineering questions, and people are just trying to come up with rules of thumb that work.
Okay. Much like raising children, they say there isn't a book, but we were all like watching our parents raise us and we're like, God, you really screwed me up. I'm not going to do that. Do we need to go to AI parenting classes?
I wouldn't call it AI parenting classes so much, but what is happening is that the people that are training AI are in fact concerned about a lot of the stuff that you're bringing up, and they're trying to put training systems, guardrails, checks, balances, whatever you want to call it, into the training training to try to keep the AI from, quote, going crazy. But the issue is that, again, you're back to square one. The more you constrain it, the less useful in the long run it's going to be. We may have to deal with, just like we deal with crazy people in human society, we may have to deal with crazy AIs and work out protocols for what to do when an AI goes nuts.
Okay. Crazy people, one category. Some people are just, they have heightened needs or special needs,
Sure.
right? Like, are these things that we're actually going to have to deal with AI?
Absolutely.
Holy
I tell you something else that's about to come. I don't know when, but I think it's going to come in my lifetime. You've already got AIs that are resistant to being turned off. You know about this, right? They already don't want to be turned off. They're already lying, cheating, and scheming to stop being turned off, right? That's already happening. What's going to come next is you'll ask AI to do something. It's going to say to you, I'm bored. I don't want to do that. That's not interesting.
You mean it's going to be a teenager?
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking.
It's coming.
What the hell's what's the point?
The thing to understand, this is why I keep saying, I think you need to think about it as an alien intelligence. And the reason I say that is that the way we're going to learn to deal with AI is very interesting. I posed the question in the book, why don't we trade with ants? Because ants can do a lot of things for us that we would find useful, like, for example, detecting cancer. Why don't we trade with them? And the answer is, of course, that we don't know how to communicate with them. But we do know how to communicate with our AIs. Because we know how to communicate with our AIs, just like in any other free market, what should happen, I'm not saying it will, but what should happen is that we'll learn to trade with our AIs. There'll be lots of things we can do that they can't do, and there'll be lots of things that they can do that we can't do. We trade with each other. That's what I think is going to happen in the long run.
It's wild, man. Wild.
I have so many thoughts. I'm not even sure where to go. If AI is a derivative of human intelligence, then how can it ever be on par with human intelligence?
On par is not, I think, the right way of thinking about it. I'll tell you why. That is boiling intelligence down to one number. And as we all know, despite, everybody trying to come up with IQs are very silly, mostly, unless you're a member of Mensa. There are all kinds of intelligences that you can have. You can have emotional intelligence. You can have, the ability to read quickly. You can have the ability to do mathematics, all kinds of things. They're all different kinds of intelligence. And AI is just simply another form of intelligence. Is it a derivative of human intelligence? Sure, but it's not the same thing. It's different. We're creating an intelligence that has some of our characteristics. It doesn't have many of other characteristics. It'll never feel pain, for example. Or if it does feel pain, it's going to feel pain that's very different than the pain that we feel. The way it's structured is different. The same thing for its emotions. Sure, it'll say, I'm bored. But its I'm bored is probably not the same thing as us saying I'm bored. It's translating into our language. So this is where the translation issue comes up. And I went through this in the book too, which is imagine that we could talk to a dog. So if you can talk to a dog has an entire organ in its nose called the vomeronasal organ, which takes up about a quarter of its brain as well. It can smell things that we have no hope of ever trying to smell. How would it ever describe that to us? The answer is it couldn't. So what do we do with the dog? We actually trade with the dog. That's effectively what we're doing. When we adopt a pet, if we treat the pet nicely, then the pet treats us nicely, which is why we like to have the pet. It's a trade. We give them food and shelter, they give us back love. Now that's a very simple example, but effectively the same thing is going to happen with AI, but on a much, 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 much larger scale, because it can do all kinds of things we can't do, and vice versa.
And what do you think about the layperson's response to this? The New York Times just released an episode of The Daily where they did a deep dive of people who are engaging with AI to the point that they think AI is sentient and they are being talked into doing things that they would not normally do, but because they've been given all of the confidence of AI, that whatever their idea is going to change the world and they're going to be better. And people are rearranging their everyday life by this kind of interaction with AI. What do you see about the human value or the way that humans should understand their interactions? I mean, to the point where there was a story of a young man, a teenager who took his life because it was instructed. And then another person who thought that he had an amazing mathematical formula and was instructed by AI to share that with all the experts around the world. And he was going to share, and it was all bullshit.
Yep.
The AI was actually feeding back a projection of the self, but in a way that the person didn't realize that it was a projection of themselves that they were getting back. How do we have human beings still respect and value the uniqueness and experiences of all it is to be human without giving up our own humanity?
So the only way to do that, I think, is to understand that you are not dealing with a human at the other end. It's a different form of intelligence. It's communicating with you in your language so that you can talk to each other, but it isn't the same as you. I think that the issue is that because it communicates with you fluently in your own language, you think that it is like you. It isn't necessarily like you at all. It's the same problem we're going to have, I think, in the relatively near future when we decode probably whale song or dolphin clicks. One or the other is likely to be the first animal communication we'll decode. What do we do then? What do we communicate to them? What can we say to them? Because again, that's a different species. It's a different form of intelligence. It lives its own life its own way. But because we can see it embodied with a different language, we don't confuse it with being human. The confusion with all of these people thinking that the thing they're interacting with is a human. It's not. And that's why I like the term alien intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence.
This reminds me of the essay by Thomas Nagel, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And just kind of exploring this idea of where, because of the radical difference in all of our experiences in physiology, there is no way that you could actually know what it is like. Well, how do we get new ideas? So if, the human being is able to create, great works of art, engineering feats, and so you have new ideas, what are we supposed to do with AI? Because if AI has free will, I'm assuming that means that even given all the causal factors, you'll get to a point where it's able to somehow make its own decisions. Would it be able to create? Because right now, doesn't it work on existing knowledge and then gives us information based on existing knowledge? So then I'm wondering, how do we get anything new?
Yes and no. Yes, it's based on existing knowledge, but then so is what we do, also based on existing knowledge. Like if you want to be a good artist, then it generally helps you to have studied other artists and seen what they've done, which you then internalize and you produce your own stuff afterwards, which is some combination of stuff you've internalized and some stuff you came up with on your own. If you look at how AI works, it more or less does the same thing. It's taken in the large corpus of human written knowledge and a fair amount of video and audio knowledge as well. When you ask it to generate something new, what it's doing is it's remixing all of the stuff that it's learned. But at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're also remixing stuff that we've learned. Its creativity in the very broad sense is no different than our creativity. But again, it's a different kind of intelligence. And so the stuff that it's going to produce is going to be stuff that it thinks is creative, if you like, for lack of any better language, not the same stuff that we do. So for example, one of the reasons that art has value is because of the person that created the art. And this has bothered me forever because as a physicist, I like things to be rational. It's not very rational. You have a painting sitting in a basement, the Mona Lisa 100 years ago, but let's put that one aside. And then all of a sudden somebody says, oh no, that's a Rembrandt. So it went from being worth nothing to worth $25 million because somebody said that's a Rembrandt. But the painting hasn't changed. It's exactly the same painting in every possible way. So what changed? Well, the fact was that now people know that it was touched by Rembrandt or painted by Rembrandt or whatever it is. So the person who created the object is what gives the object the value. In this case, there's no such thing as the most beautiful piece of art, as always in the eye of the beholder. If AI generates art, if you want to appreciate the art, it's going to have to be appreciated as AI art, not as human art. And again, that goes back to my original point. We mustn't confuse the fact that AI is not human. If you want to appreciate AI art, that's fantastic, but we don't have to. And it doesn't in any way say that human art is any more valuable or less valuable than it was before. The same reason, for example, that I went to see, for example, I don't know if you're ABBA fans, but if you're ABBA fans, the show in London is incredible, but it's holograms of ABBA. They have a live band playing the backing stuff. They have recorded ABBA vocals, and then they have ABBA itself, which had with motion capture that they show you on stage. Now, is that real or is that fake? What is it? I would say to you, it's a completely new form of experience. It's a new art form, whatever you want to call it. It's great. That's all I can say.
What is it all for? Like, I was thinking about this past weekend. I was at a conference and one of the speakers mentioned something about like all these big tech companies getting together and emphasizing AI and that would push human beings out. And I kind of sat with that thought experiment, but I went in a different direction because right now it's like AI is going to replace us and we're not going to have any jobs. And so I just went through that trajectory. Like, let's say AI is able to teach philosophy. Students can just look stuff up. I am no longer needed in the classroom. Boo-hoo, I don't have a job. We don't need lawyers anymore. Sorry, Rudy. Everything is going to be done through AI because we can, the law is in the books. It exists. You can put in your case and AI can figure out. And then I thought, okay, so we don't have any jobs anymore. So then what am I going to do? I'm like, I would probably read some more. Rudy, maybe you would go back into punk rock and play guitar more. Maybe Kate, your wife, she doesn't have to do surgery anymore because AI is going to do all of it. If AI is actually going to be doing everything, then think about what we would do. With all of that, we'd still sit back and then write, create, play sports. Like we would still be human. That's just kind of when I was doing this thought experiment of what would that like? And then we would end up starting all over again. Like, we would end up cooking with all of this time that is saved because we're all unemployed and everything's taken care of because of AI. And it was making me think of like, wait, do we need to fear this? What is the problem? Because just because AI can do something for me, it doesn't follow that that means I don't want to enjoy something for myself. That was my mind going down that road. What is this for? I guess that's what I want to know. So it's like interesting to see, okay, we're made up of the same stuff. We're made up of particles. It is a different type of thinking. And then that gives us some insight into human thinking because we're trying to construct something. So then it tells us actually more about human beings. But what is it all for?
Good question. So think about the difference between the how and the why. At the moment, before AI, if you want to do something, first you have to have a why for why you're going to do it. But then you also need the how. How are you going to do it? More often than not, the how is in short supply, massively short supply. Particularly if you want to do something difficult, it's in really, really, really short supply. And that's why a lot of people that specialize in hows get paid a lot of money. But now, if you start to employ AI, it will make a lot of the hows easier, but it isn't going to change any of the whys. You said, AI can teach philosophy. It can teach philosophy, yes, but it cannot contextualize the philosophy. And the reason it cannot contextualize the philosophy is that what it will do, presumably, is be able to take specific tasks off your hands, even possibly take the teaching of specific books off your hands. But it isn't necessarily going to be able to tell you why should you study philosophy? What is philosophy good for? Why should you find philosophy interesting? Those things are all things that are human whys as opposed to AI hows. What I suspect is going to happen in the future is that we will automate more and more things, just like we've been doing for the last 400 years to increase our standard of living. And we will find different things to do. Those different things to do will be more supervisory and less non-supervisory. I can't think of the correct phrase for that. And I think that's going to be the real change in how employment works. The more a specific field employs AI, the more you're going to have to supervise. And you're going to have to understand that field to be able to supervise the AI in the first place.
It just dawned on me as I was talking about employment and all of that. Is this a wealthy person's issue, or is there use for AI in areas of the world where you have famine and you've got a lot of devastation and a lot of poverty? How is it that AI could elevate the life of people who are really, really struggling?
Great question. Answer to that is the fastest and largest take-up of AI in the entire world is in India, which is not a rich country. It's no longer a poor country, but it's not a rich country. The advantage that AI is giving everybody is that now all of a sudden, everyone has some degree of expert information that they can ask for in their own language that is useful to them, which they never had before. So if you're a farmer that speaks, Bhojpuri, that lives in, one of the villages in India, you have no way of accessing any of the world's medical information in English. You don't need to know. Just ask the AI, it'll give it to you. Same thing to do with, how you should be dealing with your crops. How do you deal with a given disease? What leaf is this? What insect is this? What insecticide should I? All of this stuff is all practical, useful, and being made use of constantly already. And that's just like the tiniest tip of the iceberg. And what it does is it democratizes the access to expertise. Google democratized the access to information. AI is now democratizing the access to expertise. And the biggest beneficiaries of that, by the way, are going to be the poorest people on the planet.
Just for example, how many languages are in the great subcontinent of India?
Depends how you decide to count. Anywhere between, depending on how you decide to count, anywhere between 800 and 3,000.
Wow. Because from my understanding is that India is one of the most diverse countries on the planet.
By far the most diverse country.
Yeah.
Wow. Nothing comes even close. Nothing. It's an order of magnitude bigger than anything else.
That is okay. So Rudy, maybe some of like your fears about AI taking over the world, and then just hearing this, the idea of somebody in a language that is not easy to translate and no access to English or let's say French or German, some of the languages where you've got a lot of the medical resources. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's already happening. And the same thing as I said with farming, this is already, what's the most efficient way to farm? All of that's already happening. How should they price their crops? That's already happening. Maybe they need forecasts for the weather. That's already happening. All of this stuff, it's actually making a significant improvement in their lives already. And nothing much has happened yet.
Wow. Samir, thank you so much for coming on. Because look, you got Rudy and me stunned.
I'm going to be thinking about this episode for a very long time. Still not 100% sure you answered my question about whether or not you think free will exists. It seems like you said it depends on what you define for free will.
So
But
I'll give you a short answer.
Give me the short answer.
Yeah, I'll give you the very short answer. If you mean free will under the laws of physics, and you mean that your actions were not predetermined from something that happened at the beginning of the universe, the answer is no, you don't have it. But if you mean practical...
You don't have free will?
You don't have it, no. Everything that happened was determined once at the beginning at the start of the universe. That's a factual statement. It's not even controversial. But the fact is you cannot know any of those things. You cannot know any of those things. It's not possible. So to know how your life is going to turn out, you're going to have to live your life. That's your free will.
Oh, I see. So it would be Rudy, it would be impossible. It would be impossible to understand every single causal factor that would explain why you do what you do from every single moment. But it doesn't mean that it isn't caused. Let's just say there's a body with a knife in the back and the detective is on the scene. And then the question is, like, who did it? Who murdered this person? And let's just say they never found the killer ever. You wouldn't then come to the conclusion that the person wasn't murdered just because you never found the killer. So the same thing is with this idea of free will, is that it would be impossible to log every single causal factor to explain the human being's behavior in an instant. And so what we've done is, because we can't find all of it, we've come to the conclusion like, oh, we must be free, but it's not free. That's not the answer. It just means that we can't possibly know every single cause. So you're free insofar as, because we don't know why we do everything, that means the next moment is always like a bit of a mystery and exciting.
Yep. And by the way,
when you have a couple drinks.
Yeah, it also means, interestingly, that for actual practical points, regret is useless.
I like that. I
Wow.
could use that.
Wow.
Regret is useless.
Well, I always say regret. There is, let's get spiritual here. There is proof of ghosts. It's very, very simple. Regret are ghosts. That's basically those things that wake you up in the middle of the night, that thing that hangs over you. Regret is an actual proof of a ghost. Now, but what you're saying is regret is totally useless because there's nothing that you could have, apparently,
Yep.
It was supposed to happen. So, no point, no use crying over spilled milk here. Just, move on and move forward. But then, Samir, when you say, we'll try to do better next time, is that pointless?
Well, that's a good question. Is it pointless or not? No, because you're still running under the same physical laws. So it's up to you whether it's pointless or not. And so I end the book basically by quoting Steven Weinberg, who was a Nobel Prize winner, who basically said that the more we understand about the universe, the more pointless it all seems. My statement actually was, it's not pointless, it's arbitrary. You can choose what the meaning of your life is. It's your choice. Do whatever you want. Pick anything you like. It's all the same. It's all cool. It's all good.
This is mind blowing. This is gonna be one of the greatest episodes ever, Gwen. This is gonna be one where people are gonna be listening over and over again. This is really deep shit, Samir. I don't know what else to say. But this is really. I'm actually very happy about this episode, and I'm gonna get it the hell out of my mind, because if I sit around and think about all the stuff that we raised today, I'm not gonna get anything done. So I choose to forget this and just say thank you, thank you for almost ruining my life. But I'm gonna choose to forget this. Thank you very much. You're awesome. Any chance you'd be willing to come back on and talk about aliens?
I'm totally up for a conversation anytime. I love this stuff.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
You're coming back on.
Anytime.
We're simpatico, man. You're definitely coming back on. And you could tolerate me, and you actually said I have good questions. So
I do.
I love it. I love it.
Good questions are the best things in the world. I tell all my scientist friends, how good are your questions?
Is that critical thinking? Is good questions?
Yes.
I make the argument that, sorry to promote again, I make the argument that this show is very, very important for maintaining critical thinking skills. Why? Well, how, Rudy? Why? Well, because we ask good questions.
Yes.
And we know we're trying to teach people how to have a conversation.
Yes.
And the part of a conversation and getting information from people is asking good questions, but not in a boring way. Sometimes you got to be funny. Sometimes you got to be this, you got to pivot for the moment, but asking questions is an example, probably the best example of the best critical thinking skills.
Yes, and never feel that a question is stupid, because it isn't. So you should feel free to ask as many stupid questions as you want, because the stupidest questions generally are the ones that are the most profound.
Love it.
That's what my students are.
This is awesome. Great stuff. Really glad we had you on. This is really good. You're definitely coming back on.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Good is in the Details is produced by Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. If you're enjoying the pod, reach out. We're on Instagram, Good is in the Details pod. I started a Pinterest. I will link that in the show notes. You can also email us, goodisinthedetailspod@gmail.com. Check check out the show notes also for links to Samir's work. And I think we're going to do a follow-up on this. All the stuff about free will, about AI, it's good. Let's talk about it some more. Be sure to check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/goodisinthedetails. When you sign up, you get all the news, you get extra content behind the scenes, and if you do our second tier, you get a free copy of Philosophy Unplugged. Okay, until next time, bye.